Now, this next step will make sense much later in the video when we're finishing off the tree. And by no means do you have to do this part. And it may make more sense for you to watch the entire video to see how I use this next part. I've spaced out and placed all of the colorful Christmas ornaments we just cut a few moments ago and started adhering them in place. So for the Christmas ornaments, I'm using Thinset as the adhesive, and I'll tell you why. So I don't want you to feel limited. Let's find a solution to help you achieve the look that you want for your mosaic. Now, I'm not being too concerned at this point if I added too much Thinset, because as I place tesserae around each of the ornaments, I'm checking to make sure they're all around the same level as the tesserae next to them. That's not really a color most people have. So I started the process of creating a custom color, and I love creating custom colors. So that's why I say those types of materials can possibly help you when grouting. Let's get to it. Welcome back. And if you're new here, my name is Julie. And on this channel, we talk about tips, tricks, tools, adhesives, materials, and specific mosaic projects, all to shorten your learning curve when it comes to creating mosaic art. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, please consider subscribing. I don't know about you, but I love me some Christmas decorations. I love the Christmas season. The hustle and bustle, the music, the Christmas plaid, the gluten-free sweet treats, the color-coded Christmas trees, the house is all lit up. I love it all. So when I have an opportunity to create a Christmas-themed mosaics, count me in. I've done a number of Christmas-themed tutorials here on my channel, including ornaments, wall art, and a winter tree. And if you haven't watched them yet, I'll include a link to the playlist down below in the description, especially if you're looking for inspiration this holiday season. But today's video idea has been brewing in my head for a number of years, and I'm so glad we're finally able to bring it to fruition today. And as you can tell from the title of this video, we're making a mosaic Christmas tree stocking holder. Now, stocking holders can be as simple or elaborate as you like. Some of them are pretty bougie. In fact, I think the one we're going to make today looks pretty bougie, but honestly, it probably cost about $15 or less in total to make. And this is why handmade is the way. And before we get too deep into the video, I just want to say I'm beyond ecstatic with how the stocking holder turned out, and I cannot wait to share it all with you. I think you'll get some tips and tricks along the way, regardless of whatever shape your substrate on your stocking holder is. So in today's video, we'll make a mosaic stocking holder from the very beginning. The substrate, adhesives, tiling, grouting, and of course, the finishing off and pulling everything together. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started. Before we do anything, we first need to talk about the main character of this stocking holder, which is the substrate. Now, when deciding on the substrate to use, I don't want you to limit yourself. And this is because the substrate I'm using is a wood Christmas tree ornament. Yes, an ornament. But obviously, we aren't going to use it as an ornament. But that's not going to stop me from using it. So if you're out shopping this holiday season and you find an ornament that would be perfect to use, then get it. This one is 3/4 of an inch thick, which is a great thickness and sturdiness for a project like this. It can sit level by itself, which is also an important factor to keep in mind. So when deciding if a substrate is a good choice or not, I would go with a substrate that is a minimum of 1/2 inch thick. Anything thinner than that might look out of place on your stocking holder and have difficulty standing up on its own during the construction process. And I'll include some options for you in a list with links down below in the description. And since this Christmas tree won't be used as an ornament anymore, I do need to remove the hanger and the hook that's at the top. This one is simple to remove since it's just a screw-in hook, which can easily be removed, and thankfully it doesn't seem that they glued it into place either. So this was super quick to remove. And now that the hook has been pulled out, I'm not going to worry about the hole that's at the top because I'm actually going to cover it with my Mosaic tesserae a little further in the video. So now I have an unfinished wood Christmas tree shape that's ready for the next step. And that next step is I need to seal the wood before I begin my tile work. Now, if you aren't sure how to seal wood for mosaic art, I've done a video all about it, and I'll include a link to it down below in the description. And yes, I sealed both sides of my substrate because one side will be tiled and the other will be finished off, and we'll get to that part, both of those parts rather, later in the video. Okay, so for the materials, I knew I wanted this Christmas tree to be a mixed media mosaic, but in particular, I wanted the front of the tree to be broken plates, bowls, or cups. You know how sometimes you just want to make a mosaic with a certain color or a certain specific material? That's the feeling I've been having leading up to this project. So I started by going through my container of green broken plates, bowls, and cups. I was looking for something specific, which had green for the actual tree, as well as maybe a plate or something that had green and white for the white to symbolize snow. And I found exactly what I was hoping for, and I felt that both the solid green and the green and white plates, they looked really good together. I also pulled some small pieces of brown stained glass for the tree trunk. Then I went, what I call dumpster diving, into my scrap glass container, and I was looking for small pieces of rainbow colors so I could cut round circles out of them for the tree's ornaments. So this doesn't take much glass, and this is why I encourage you guys to keep your cutoffs whenever you're working with glass tile or stained glass, even ceramic plates, bowls, and cups, because you just never know when those little cutoffs are going to come in handy. So here's what I pulled, and I think they'll make bright and cheerful ornaments. Now, this next step will make sense much later in the video when we're finishing off the tree. And by no means do you have to do this part. And it may make more sense for you to watch the entire video to see how I use this next part of the tutorial. And then at that point, you can decide if you want to do this part or not. I know I'm making this sound very confusing. But I pulled some silver brads to include on the tree as well. Now, if you aren't familiar, brads are a scrapbooking item which I've used often in my mosaic work, especially my Christmas ornaments. The brads will be the anchors for my garland. I want there to be garland on this Christmas tree, and they are going to be a very important part in that process, which I will take you through later in this video. So I drew on the substrate where I wanted to adhere the brads and how I wanted the garland to drape, just so I could get a feel that I placed and spaced out the brads somewhat evenly. And once I was happy with the placement, I used an awl to make a shallow hole in the substrate for the brads. I didn't go very deep, but I did make sure that I had a little starter for the brads. And then I dragged the end of each brad through weld bond, which is a white PVA glue that's perfect for mosaics. And I placed each one in a hole just enough to be in the substrate. I made sure that they were about the same height from the surface of the substrate and straight up and down. Next, I knew I wanted green vitreous glass tile around the edge of the tree, so I got started cutting those with my willed glass nippers. Before we get to the tiling of the tree, I'll include a list with links down below in the description for everything that I'm using in today's video in case you want to make a Christmas stocking holder as well. I got started with tiling the entire edge of the substrate first, and I began with the tree trunk. I first worked on cutting the brown stained glass pieces and then adhered them to the sides of the substrate. You see here that I'm once again using Weld Bond as the adhesive. When tiling a project like this where the edges are going to be tiled as well as the front, I like to start with the edges and then tile the front. I should also note that I'm working on a piece of wax paper under the substrate, which the Weld Bond won't stick to. And the substrate is also flat on my work table. I'm doing this so that all of the tesserae around the edge of the substrate are flat along the back of the mosaic and won't slip down as they're drying. They're actually touching the table just as the substrate is. So as the tesserae dries, they'll stay firmly in place up against the substrate. And next I got to work with adhering the green vitreous glass to the edge of the substrate in the same way as I did the brown stained glass. The green vitreous are the 3/4 inch size, which I cut in half. However, in some spots I did need to cut them even smaller or thinner in order to get them into some tight spots around the tree. And here's the Christmas tree with its tiled edge. Next I got to work with the round Christmas ornaments I was planning to cut out of the scrap glass that's in those rainbow colors. You know, the ones we went dumpster diving for. With a permanent marker, I drew a circle on each one, which would serve as my guide for cutting them out when I used my willed glass nippers. Drawing on your glass is an easy way for you to see what you need to quickly nip off. Permanent marker can easily be rubbed off of stained glass either with your finger or with your grout, quite frankly, when you're grouting. Or you can use rubbing alcohol to get some stubborn marks off. And once you get all the way around your piece of glass, you can take a look and see if you need to nip a little more or not. Does it look like a circle if that's the shape you're going for? And once I was done cutting out all of the circles, I took them over to my electric glass grinder to smooth out the edges. And here they are, the round ornaments for my Christmas tree. Next, I got started on the good stuff, and let's be honest, we want to see this tree really come to life. So I began by working on the tree trunk first, just as I did with the edge. I decided I didn't want a grout line going through the stained glass on the front of the tree, so I cut a piece that was big enough to cover the entire area. It's not huge, it's not a big area, but still, I knew I didn't want a grout line going through it. Once I smoothed the edges on my glass grinder, I adhered that piece of glass to the substrate. And here's how the tree trunk looks all tiled. Alright guys, now we're getting to the good stuff because we're actually going to start tiling the rest of the tree. I'll be using this beautiful solid green broken plate as well as the fun green and white pattern dinner plate which you saw me pull from my stash earlier in the video. I've spaced out and placed all of the colorful Christmas ornaments we just cut a few moments ago and started adhering them in place. So for the Christmas ornaments, I'm using Thinset as the adhesive, and I'll tell you why. The ornaments are from glass, both stained glass and glass tile. So I've got different tesserae thicknesses going on here throughout the Christmas tree because I'm also going to be using plates, bowls, and cups. So the Christmas ornaments are the thinnest material I'm using. So to help me with all of the pieces looking a little more even on the same surface level of the mosaic, I've decided to use a thicker, stiffer adhesive, so I'm using Thinset to do that. Thinset is a cement-based adhesive and it allows you to build up the adhesive under tesserae, especially in a mixed media mosaic where you've just got all sorts of thicknesses of your materials in one mosaic piece. If you'd rather something else than Thinset, another adhesive option that would allow you to do this would be something like Epoxy Sculpt. These stiffer types of adhesives make it appear that all the materials you used in your mosaic are the same thickness, when in fact, they aren't. Ooh, sneaky. I know thinset can be intimidating to mix up, and let's be honest, storing it because it only comes in heavier quantities can be a pain in the butt. So for a project like this, if you use a mix of materials, then the premix variety of thinset, which comes in a small quart size, is just fine. Now, I'm not being too concerned at this point if I added too much thinset, because as I place tesserae around each of the ornaments, I'm checking to make sure they're all around the same level as the tesserae next to them. But putting them in place ahead of tiling the tree helps me remember that they're accounted for, so I don't have to worry about them as I go through the tiling process, which I've been known to do. And as I tile the tree, I'm also making sure that as I tile around the silver brads, which we adhered a little earlier in the video, that they're also at the same surface level as the tile pieces around them. And as you can see, I'm back to using Weld Bond for the greenery of the tree, since those are my thickest tesserae. As I'm placing each tessera, either the army green or the green and white plate, there's no method to my madness. I'm just placing whatever looks good and feels right to me. I'm trying to not have a lot of one color in one spot, and I'm definitely trying to distribute or disperse them throughout the mosaic. Now, as I tile around the silver brads, I'm trying to leave a little bit of space around the entire brad because I'll need to get to them later in the video. I'm really building up these silver brads to be something amazing, and let me tell you, they are good stuff. You'll see. And as I'm tiling the tree, I'm also not concerned if my tesserae happen to trail off the substrate in any areas. I'm okay with that. And I actually prefer it because then it doesn't look like things are so perfect. Because, you know, trees in nature have branches that go all over the place. And so I want this to look a little more natural, like what we'd find in nature. And here she is, all tiled and ready to sit and do absolutely nothing, like the little princess that she is, for at least 24 to 48 hours until we can move on to the next step. Now we get to see this little cutie come to life with some grout, only I wasn't sure what color I wanted to use. So I posted the question across all of my social media accounts, and black, brown, and green were the top suggestions. But ultimately, I decided on green. The only problem is I don't have any green grout. That's not really a color most people have. So I started the process of creating a custom color, and I love creating custom colors. And I've made it easy to do using something I created called the GROUT-THINSET recipe card. So this recipe card tracks 14 items or tasks that you'll use or go through when you're creating a custom color of grout or thinset. And let me tell you, I'm so glad I created my own recipe for this project, because as it turns out, I'll need to whip up another batch of the green grout, which I'll explain later in the video. It's nice to be able to refer back to how did I get to this color. Now, I've been tracking grout and thinset recipes for a while now, so not only do I have something to reference back to, whether it's my project or a client's project, but also in the case like this Christmas tree stocking holder today, I'll need to do a little, I won't call it repair work, but I'll need to fill in some small holes, and we'll definitely want the grout to match what I am going to be grouting now. If you're interested, I'll include a link to the recipe card down below in the description. And let me also say that if you aren't sure how to mix up grout or thinset, or color grout or thinset, or seal them, basically anything that has to do with grout or thinset, I've done videos on all of those topics here on my channel, and I'll include a link to the playlist down below in the description as well. Okay, so once I was happy with the color that I mixed up, after I added the water, I got started with grouting. And I grouted all around the edge first, since that was the easiest part. You know, get that done and out of the way. And then I carefully and slowly started grouting the front of the Christmas tree. Now, I didn't grout it in my normal way, which is sometimes a little quick. This time I was slow and deliberate because of the silver brads. I know those silver brads keep popping up, but you'll see. You'll see. I didn't want them to get too buried in the grout, so I took my time. I was careful to grout around them, but not cover them up in the same way as I did with all of the tesserae on the mosaic. And as I grouted, I pushed the grout into the grout line. So if you aren't aware, the grout line is the area between the pieces of your plates, bowls, and cups, or whatever materials you decide to use. This being a mixed media mosaic, the grout behaves differently for one type of tesserae to the other. Okay, so for instance, when I grouted around the edge, the grout can easily be wiped off of the stained glass and vitreous glass tile. Sometimes to a fault, a little too easily. Sometimes you got to go back in there and add grout back in. But when I grouted the tree, the exposed, unglazed areas of the broken plates almost grab a hold of the grout and make your job a little easier, so to speak. Don't get me wrong, it's still work. You're still having to do the grouting work. But broken ceramic, porcelain, terracotta, they all grab a hold of the grout or thinset, whatever it is you're using, which then attracts even more grout or thinset. So that's why I say those types of materials can possibly help you when grouting. And once I was done grouting, I rubbed my finger along the back of the Christmas tree to create a smooth, clean edge of glass and the grout. And then I let it sit and dry for about 5 to 10 minutes before moving on to the next step. The mosaic has been sitting and drying a little. We don't want it to dry too much. And now it's ready to be cleaned off. In removing the grout, I'm being just as careful as I was when I was applying the grout. Mixed media mosaics in general can give you pause as you grout and clean off the grout because there's the chance that the materials are not all at the same surface level, which means it's easier for you to get injured. We don't want to think about that, but it happens. Or maybe you bump a piece and either loosen it or it pops off altogether. So you do want to proceed with caution whenever you grout a mosaic, but especially when you grout a mixed media mosaic. And I was very mindful of the silver brads as I removed the excess grout. So rubbing in a clockwise, counterclockwise motion wherever possible. And I'm doing my best not to rub so hard that I remove the grout from the grout line. I know it's like rub the grout, take it off, but don't rub too hard that you rub the grout out of the grout line. I know, there's a fine line here. And make sure you also remove the grout along the edge, as well as run your finger along the back of the Christmas tree substrate to create a clean edge with the stained glass and the vitreous glass tile where it meets the substrate. And then I went in with a toothpick and cleared away any grout around our friends, you guessed it, the silver brads. I need to be able to get up under the brads once we get to the finishing off step. And ooh, we are getting so close. The next thing I like to do is to remove grout dust using a chip brush, or you can use an old paintbrush. So I just brush it over the surface, front, back, and around the edge, and it helps to get rid of some of the grout dust. Okay, so before we can construct the stocking holder, there are a few things we need to do first. And starting with, I like to finish off the backs of my mosaics. Now, whether someone will see it or not, that doesn't matter. I'll know, and that's what matters. And I like the backs to also be finished off. Plus, I just think it's a good habit to get into that the entire mosaic is utterly and completely finished off. So I got started by painting 2 coats of green acrylic craft paint on the back of the substrate. And you want to let each coat dry thoroughly in between coats. Next, I signed the back because an artist always signs their work, and I have a favorite pen that I like to use for that. And lastly, I painted a coat of matte varnish to seal everything in and give it a nice finished off look. So I let the varnish dry overnight, and then the next day I flipped the tree over because I wanted to add a few embellishments on the front. Okay, finally, remember those silver brads I placed all along the tree? And I kept having to remind you guys that I had to be careful about the silver brads. We're finally going to do something constructive with them. Yay! Those are going to be the anchors for my garland. So before I get started, if doing the brads and then what you'll see with the garland is too much, you can still make this mosaic Christmas tree stocking holder and just tile your tree however you like and move on to the constructing step instead. But I wanted garland on this tree, and I want to show you how I use the brads to add the garland in case you like the way it looks and you want to do the same thing to your mosaic. So I'm using 26 gauge wire that you would use in jewelry making, as well as some metallic silver seed beads. I started by cutting a long piece of wire. I wanted one continuous piece of wire for the entire Christmas tree. And I didn't know how long of wire I would need, so I just kept unraveling the wire. And I wrapped one end of the wire around a brad at the top of the tree. And I should also note that I wrapped wire around each brad twice. And then I strung beads on the wire. Apparently, I didn't get enough beading with my last tutorial here on my channel. And if you haven't seen the mosaic totem pole video yet, it's a fun watch and a fun project, so I'll include a link to it down below in the description if you're interested. But in that video, I worked with a lot of beads for the witch's hair. So yeah, apparently I didn't get enough time with the beads. Anyways, and once I strung enough beads for the garland in this little section, and I reached that next brad on the tree, I did the same thing where I wrapped the wire around the brad twice, and then I continued to string more beads for the next section of garland. I made sure that within each section, there was a little bit of a drape or a swag in that section before I would wrap it around the next brad. And I did this all the way down the Christmas tree. Okay, so let's say you love the look of the garland, but dealing with the brads is like, nah, no thank you. But you really want the garland. You could use small nails instead, and it would give your Christmas tree a rustic look, which I think is also awesome. I just wanted to use the brads because they're such a bright metallic silver, and I knew that I wanted the garland to be a bright metallic silver, but play with it. Don't, I don't want you to be turned off because the brads seem like the biggest pain in the butt. Yeah, they are a little bit of a pain in the butt, but I'm so happy with how it ended up. But if it's too much, look for a smaller nail. And you can do the same thing. You can wrap the wire around it. You can string your garland from side to side on the Christmas tree. So I don't want you to feel limited. Let's find a solution to help you achieve the look that you want for your mosaic. And to finish off the tree embellishments, I found a metallic gold ceramic star, which I adhered at the top of the tree using weld bond. Okay, so there was still one item that I didn't know what to do with. And that was the ends of the wire where I started around the first brad and ended around that last brad. So I decided I would cut the ends really, really short and tuck them into the first hole and the last hole of the brads. And then I carefully added a little weld bond around the wire which was tucked around each brad, just to keep everything in place. Okay, so going back to our grouting session where I said I was so happy that I had written down my grout recipe on how I achieved that specific green color. Yeah. Now you see why I did that. I do have some little areas or gaps around a couple of the brads that I'm just not happy with. I want those filled in. And now in looking at the finished Christmas tree, if I don't go back in with a little bit of grout, and I'm going to apply the grout using a toothpick, and I'm going to keep piling on the grout in those little areas. If I don't fill those areas in, every time I look at the mosaic, my eye will immediately go to those holes. Please tell me I'm not the only person who does that. But I want to fill those in, and I can see that I not only can fill those in, but I can kind of bring the grout a little closer to the silver brad. So I'm beyond ecstatic that I created a recipe that I can now reference back to for this project, for another project, whatever it is. I do like the color green that I created, but it just gives you a reference point, and you don't have to think later on like, oh crap, how did I get to that green color? And then you know, mix up some green color that doesn't match, you go in, you repair your mosaic, and it's obvious that that happened at a different point when the rest of your project was grouted. So I'm just trying to help you avoid that in the future. GROUT-THINSET recipe card, game changer. Okay, here we go. The substrate for the actual stocking holder is a basic black metal stocking holder. So I've also seen this style of stocking holder in a silver metal, either shiny metallic or matte. I've seen it in gold, both shiny and matte. I've also seen this style of stocking holder in acrylic and marble and wood. And I'll include some options for you in the list down below with the links in case you are on the search for your ideal stocking holder. Let me just say this since we're already in the holiday season. If you know you want to make a mosaic stocking holder, and you know that you want the material of the stocking holder to be a certain material, and you've seen it in the store or online, go ahead and buy it. These things sell out. And then search for your substrate. Substrates are more easy to find, but stocking holders, especially the more specialized one, marble, acrylic, wood, some of the brushed metals, those are the first to sell out. Go ahead, get your stocking holder, look for your substrate, and then you're set up to make your stocking holder this year. I don't want to see you having to put it off for next year because you weren't able to find the stocking holder you wanted. So if the case is you want to make one this year, go ahead, look for, obviously you want to look for your substrate, but also be a little aggressive and on it as far as looking for the actual stocking holder so that you get what you want. Okay, so I measured the stocking holder to see where the middle is, and I did the same thing on the Christmas tree. Now, I'd like the Christmas tree to pretty much be in the center of the stocking holder as best I can. I'm not going to stress out about it, but I'm doing what I can to try and make that happen. The adhesive I'm using to attach the Christmas tree to the stocking holder is epoxy sculpt. Now, Epoxy Sculpt is a two-part adhesive which you mix together right before you're ready to use it. And I'm using Epoxy Sculpt because it's a stiff adhesive which has a very strong hold once it's dry, and it won't allow the Christmas tree to move around or slide as it dries. And I've done a video all about how to mix it up and use it in your mosaic art, so I'll include a link to that video down below in the description. Other adhesives you could use would be thinset or silicone. Both are strong and have a great hold, and if you have them, then use those. To keep your substrate in place or level, if that's an issue, you could use blue painter's tape to tape your substrate either to the stocking holder or to your work table. And then once you're happy with everything, with the placement and how things are, you want to let it sit and fully dry for at least 24 to 48 hours before you move it. Now, this probably goes without saying, but once everything is dry and you're ready to use your stocking holder, you don't want to pick it up by the mosaic portion of your stocking holder, but rather by the actual stocking holder instead. And here she is. I'm so thrilled with how it turned out. And I didn't say it earlier, but I'm really pleased with how well the green grout matches the tesserae. I didn't want a color that stood out, but rather a color that complemented the mosaic work and kind of blended in. And I think the color does just that. And the beaded garland is exactly what I hoped it would be. So bright and cheerful. And oh, that gold star at the top. All of it. We are waiting for a loud engine to pass. So, one moment, please. Good stuff. Yeah, what she said. What am I trying to say? Tell me, I do want to know, what Christmas mosaic projects are you making this year? Are you making something that you saw on my channel? Are you making something that you dreamt up, kind of like today's Christmas stocking holder? I want to know. Tag me on Instagram, reply to this video here down in the comments, but let me know. Let's get a list going. Maybe some others are checking out the comments, hoping for some sort of inspiration because they so desperately want to make a Christmas themed mosaic, but they don't know what to do. Let's help them out, and let's start a list in the comments here or over on Instagram. I love you guys. I'm so thankful that you've spent part of your day with me today. We got this, don't we? I will see you soon. Take care and be well. And happy holidays. For more mosaic inspiration, check out one of these two videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye.